Welcome into part number 13 of Unknown Word, and our 12th episode in 2026 already. Yeah, I said 12. On the show today, we're talking about how our state legislative delegation voted on the various bills that we've been discussing during the session. Also, we have some last-minute housekeeping items that have cropped up in the last approximately 10 days. I'm your host, Ian Hound. On the center of the screen here, we have all the various bills that we've been following. Both forms of open enrollment. SB 101 was tabled back in April, for example. Before we talk about those, we do have a couple of housekeeping updates like I alluded to at the top here. And that includes an update on the New Hampshire Blue Envelope program, which has just recently gone into practice, and also two updates on the bills that were in committee of conference the last time I recorded one of these shows. First off, we have some housekeeping info on the New Hampshire Blue Envelope program. For our new viewers and followers, I mentioned New Hampshire RSA 265:3-C relative to the Blue Envelope program here in New Hampshire during Unknown Word part number 2. Upon reflection, however, I realized that we made some key omissions during that program. So in an attempt to correct that, here's a couple of notes on the Blue Envelope program and what it's actually supposed to be. The program was supposed to be available as of January 1st, 2026. The envelopes and guidelines were not ready at that time. After approximately 5 months of delays, the program is now live as of last Monday, May the 26th, 2026. Also, it occurred to me that I only referenced the requisite RSA number in part number 2. I didn't actually touch upon what the program's supposed to be. I have included a link to RSA 265:3-C on the right side of the screen, an article from May the 22nd, and it appeared in the Keene Sentinel in reference to the program now being live, and also a link all the way back to Unknown Word part number 2, January 2026, which was the first mention of the program in this series. A couple of key points at the bottom. Enrollment, it's a voluntary program, so enrollment is voluntary. The enrollment form is available now on the New Hampshire DMV website. Questions about the program should be directed to your local New Hampshire DMV office. For us here at HCTV, our closest would be Nashua, for example. I'm not going to read all of this, but feel free to pause it as you need to. But first slide is the very thorough description of what RSA 265:3-C actually says. And then we have points 4 and 5 of that same RSA, and both of those are from the New Hampshire General Court website. And then we have a sample of what the blue envelope would actually look like. And this is taken from the Canterbury Police Department Facebook page. And we have the box on the left side include the driver's name, emergency contact name and phone number, level of communication capability, sensory considerations, preferred calming support, instruction to the driver to the top right, and then instructions for the law enforcement officer, both in the verbal and visual respect. And that's on the lower left and right, and appears to be inverted as I look at this picture correctly. Now we get on to end of last week on Friday in regard to the two bills we've been following in regard to the Committee of Conference situation, the first of which is yet another open enrollment bill. Committee of Conference was for HB 751 FN was initially convened on May the 18th, 2026, and then resumed on both May 26th and 28th of last week. What the committee actually did with the bill, they decided to maintain the current open enrollment law and make it so that towns would have to comply with it. Any town that was non-compliant or refused to comply would then be penalized. And the report regarding from the Committee of Conference is in the link on the lower left. In regard to House Bill 1215, Grayson's Law, as the first section was referenced in, Committee of Conference date May 26, 2026. House of Representatives on the committee voted to non-concur with the Senate. During the hearing, there was an attempt to add in a last-minute amendment under the numerical guide of 2026-1611S, and it would have included wording from House Bill 1653. At the time of the slide and time of recording, no report had been filed, and New Hampshire Republicans effectively killed the bill by trying to attach a non-germane amendment to the bill and then proceeding to take no action on it in regard to filing a Committee of Conference report by last Thursday, close of business. And those who have watched Of His Own Word all the way through by this point know I'm not shy about what I have to say on these matters. So here we go. In reference to House Bill 751 FN, open enrollment number 2, I think the whole concept of what the Committee of Conference did is absolutely disgraceful. New Hampshire Republicans' determination to force through and retain current open enrollment law in the wrong direction for public schools in New Hampshire. Everyone should be alarmed by the fact that the proposed bill penalizes districts and municipalities that do not comply. Now, moving on. In regard to House Bill 1215, unfortunately, the attempt to saddle House Bill 1215 with a last-minute amendment, 2026-1611S, is right up the alley of New Hampshire Republicans. This killed the bill. The New Hampshire Republicans do not believe people with disabilities in our state should get the support they need to function on a daily basis. And also, to the first point I made, I would like to add that it's also the inaction on the Committee of Conference by not filing the report by last Thursday close of business also killed the bill. As I've said a couple of times during the course of the show, we are in an election year. Consider this when you're voting for state legislators this year. Now we're on to the main show. As we mentioned on one of the previous occasions, here's the list of our current general court delegation to Concord from Hudson. On the left side, we have all 8 names listed in the New Hampshire House, New Hampshire Senate on the right side, and then we get into what do I mean when I've been babbling about division vote versus roll call vote versus voice vote? A little bit of Elmer Fudd going on here, so bear with me. Division vote. Legislators each had their vote recorded individually, but without sharing their name. The roll call vote. Legislators vote one by one, and their votes are recorded with their names attached to their given vote. Usually yay, nay, or present. Voice vote, and you'll see a theme here in a moment, over the next few minutes. Legislators vote out loud saying yay or nay in chorus. In this case, the louder side wins. A record of how the legislator voted is not retained, but the fate of the bill is. And I pulled this from the Citizen Count New Hampshire legislature page, and the link is at the bottom of the screen for those who would wish to go back and follow through and see that for themselves. So, how did our state delegation vote for the bills that we've been following, you ask? Good question. In reference to Senate Bill 101 FN in regard to open enrollment, which is a twin of House Bill 751, which we referenced in the discussion of the Committee of Conference report a moment ago, the New Hampshire House tabled the legislation by division vote on April the 23rd. So unfortunately, there's no legislator-specific voting information available unless you go back to the April 23rd YouTube from the New Hampshire House YouTube. The Senate, however, and State Senator Sharon Carson voted in favor of ought to pass as amended on SB 101. In regard to Senate Bill 670 FNA, which Lewis and I touched on briefly in part number 7, we do not have a record of how the given legislator voted. Both chambers voted ought to pass as amended on a voice vote. And my question to you on this is, where's the accountability? Because as I go over the next couple of slides, you will see a theme here that in many of the examples, the vote was done by a voice vote. So the only way to find how the individuals, to find any acknowledgement of how the legislator voted can be found on YouTube, but on the general court website, there is no entry whatsoever. Where's the accountability? Augmented assistive communication technology, right? House Bill 1215, which we just referenced in the committee conference segment a little bit earlier in the show. Again, initially both chambers voted ought to pass as amended on a voice vote. House Bill 1215 was later killed by inaction in the non-concur vote of the committee of conference. Again, I ask you for now the at least second time, or third time, excuse me, where's the accountability here? They voice vote on all these bills, but there's no way to find a legislator by legislator record of how each of them voted on this bill. House Bill 1249 in regard to medical devices and prescription delivery, or medical devices to aid in prescription delivery. The New Hampshire House voted ought to pass as amended upon this bill by voice vote. New Hampshire Senate voted to interim study it, which in effect killed it for the session. Or soft killed it for the session, excuse me. Yet again, I ask you, where's the accountability? If they are voting on these pieces of legislation and not taking responsibility for how they are voting. Now we get to one of the original legislative cornerstones of this program, and that is State Representative Lily Fawson's House Bill 1316 relative to data privacy and a direct challenge to the 2025 National Autism Registry proposal. Unfortunately, the bill was classified as expired in the New Hampshire House before any vote took place. As I have said in part number 6 when I was joined by Sarah Trzynski, New Hampshire Republicans refused to vote on this before the midnight deadline on March the 13th. House Bill 1316 never saw a vote in either of the chambers of the New Hampshire legislature because of that. I referenced, and I'm not going to get into it here, but I referenced in greater detail what House Bill 1316 actually intended to do in part 2 when I was joined by the bill's lead sponsor, State Representative Lily Fawson Manchester, and Dr. Louis Espeto, Executive Director of ABLE New Hampshire, in January of this year. It was also talked about again in part number 3, when on that particular afternoon I was joined by State Representative Heath Howard and ABLE New Hampshire Policy Director Kristen Evans. We got into the backstory about it when I was joined by fellow advocate Shauna Hallberg in part number 4, also in February of this year. In part number 5, I gave a status update of where things stood leading into what turned out to be a 2-day marathon legislative session that got downright very childish at points and resulted in a lot of common sense bills like House Bill 1316 and 1593, of which we'll refer to later on, ending up expiring with no vote being taken because the New Hampshire House Republicans decided to play games, legislative games during those 2 days, and the reactions of which were given by myself and Sarah Trzynski in part number 6, which we in fact recorded midday on March the 13th, so just after these details were known. House Bill 1337, yet again another cornerstone of the Autism Council repeal bill, which was another cornerstone of the program so far to date. And we have the first and only roll call vote, which we touched upon the definition of at the top of the show. Representatives Dumont, Kenny, Nalachi, Prout, Ullery, Weary, Rice, Bohem, 8 for 8, all voted for the repeal, and it stood. That's what the OTP stands for at the top left. When the Senate got their turn on a voice vote, and first, quick note of clarification there. When the New Hampshire Autism Council repeal bill reached the New Hampshire Senate, they amended the bill to basically delay the start of the repeal until December of 2027. However, that doesn't change the fact that the council has in fact gotten its feet back under it and has been making strides toward addressing the concerns of the time. And that to keep in mind that in regard to the bill itself, it was merely a repeal with no replacement, no reform alternate option put onto the table. With the New Hampshire Senate, however, there's no record of how Senator Carson voted associated to her name, because they voted ought to pass as amended by a voice vote instead. See Part 12. And see Part 12 in terms of what I said in regard to the amended version. And again, voice vote. Where's the accountability? Where's the vote actually being attributed to the given legislature? Now we get to House Bill 1406. Both houses of the New Hampshire legislature voted on a voice vote, but this is the first one the second one that we're talking about, where the houses differed on opinion. The New Hampshire House voted House Bill 1406, which is safeguards in healthcare decision-making and record-keeping, that it should be passed and amended. The Senate, on a voice vote, decided that it was inexpedient to legislate because it was too vague. Translation, they were concerned about the possible retaliation and repercussions that the federal government would bring upon New Hampshire for attempting to regulate artificial intelligence in any way. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we are. We have top-down dictation that we're supposed to let artificial intelligence run rampant. As I stated in Part 12, I am for implementation of new technology. I am for artificial intelligence, but done in a responsible manner with safeguards and clear guardrails in place. In regard to the accountability, where's the accountability here? By voice voting, there's no way for us to tell how any of which side our 8 state representatives came down on, or how State Senator Carson actually voted in regard to killing the bill. House Bill 1563 FN-L in regard to supportive education funding. This is the second Band-Aid bill that I referred to in part number 12. Again, both chambers voice voted. In the case of the New Hampshire House, it was ought to pass as amended. In the New Hampshire Senate, they voted simply to pass it. And again, I ask you, if voice voting means that there is no record on how the individual legislator actually votes on the given measure, where's the accountability? We're into an election year. Consider that when making your decisions this September, this November. House Bill 1593 in regard to Section 504 protections expired before a New Hampshire New Hampshire House vote was allowed to take place. Again, as I said with House Bill 1316, the New Hampshire House Republicans refused to allow a vote on this bill before midnight on March the 13th, which was the legislative deadline prior to crossover day. And again, I'm not going to get too deep into this because I touched upon it in much more detail. It's actually a typo. Touched on this one in much more detail in part 5 and 6. And then in watching the state legislative session from start now to finish for one cycle, it fundamentally bothers me to see fundamental common sense measures like House Bill 1316 in regard to autism data privacy, House Bill 1406, and House Bill 1593 basically getting tossed to one side, in effect, because they are common sense measures, but the current House and Senate Republican majorities in the state legislature are more worried about what the federal government is going to think if we have common sense fundamental protection for certain portions of our population than actually doing their jobs. Yes, I know in the case of House Bill 1316 and House Bill 1593, they never actually saw a New Hampshire House vote because the House adjourned before any vote could take place. I mean, what are we doing? Number one. And number two, what's it going to take to get these over the finish line? That's part of the reason why I said in my comments in part number 12 that I can't get overly excited on two bills. Well, they fixed the issue. House Senate Bill 670 for one, and House Bill 1563 for the other. They're an attempt to fix the issues that they identify. They're merely Band-Aid measures. They're not gonna fix those issues overnight. I want to like those bills, but I can't exactly be happy about basically Band-Aid measures when we've got other common sense bills that basically didn't stand a chance the entire session, although it was presented as, oh, we could actually get them by. When, like I said at the top, in regard to House Bill 1590, and in regard to House Bill 1215, for example, the New Hampshire Republicans simply don't care. Honestly, what are we doing? That is why in the last couple of segments, I have been trying to get people to think. Actually think about whom you're voting for when the time comes later this year. Where's the accountability? During the legislative session, we referenced or discussed 9 proposed bills. So, to break that down, that's 18 possible final vote opportunities. 9 in the New Hampshire House, 9 in the New Hampshire Senate. Except 7 of those bills were actually voted upon by either the New Hampshire House or New Hampshire Senate. So of that original 18, that 18 drops down to 14 possible times. One of the things that I have noted over the session, and that's one of the things that bugs me about the current makeup, was of those 14 bills, 13 of the 14 possible times where the bill's fate was ultimately decided, 13 of 14 times, the chamber elected to both voice vote, which means there is no way we could find how our specific state representatives, and there's 8 of them, and or State Senator Carson voted on a given measure, because those records are not retained. If you look on the General Court website, those records just merely show that it's a voice vote, and that's it. The one exception to that 13 of 14 number is in regard to the New Hampshire Autism Council repeal bill, where the New Hampshire House did in fact request a roll call vote upon that, which we highlighted earlier in the program. And amongst the gamesmanship that we saw during the legislative session, you notice how I said 9 bills that I referenced or discussed during the session. 18 possible votes. Well, 1316, House Bill 1316, House Bill 1593 were never voted upon. Technically, were never voted upon, which is why that 9 becomes a 7 and that 18 becomes 14. Both House Bill 1316 and 1593 expired before there was a vote allowed upon them, because no action was taken upon them prior to the crossover day deadline. Now, as we wrap up the show today, we have, check us out on Blue Sky, handle of his own word, all one word, .bluesky.social. We have show update, YouTube link, New Hampshire legislative update and response to the national misrepresentation and overall national discussion about autism. Facebook, of his own word, we have show update and YouTube link, New Hampshire legislative update and response as applicable, in response to the current administration's determination to misrepresent what autism actually is and the overall discussion on the national level. We're also on the Hudson Community TV website under the search keyword of his own words, and that will take you to all 12 of the co-produced videos and flash shows that are available at the moment. Well, 12 at the time of recording. This makes number 13. And we are on Linktree and all and well, that in L and in Lincoln, I and in ice cream, N and in November, K and in Kevin, T and in Tom, R and in Robert, dot E and in Edward, E and in elephant, slash of his own word, and we have linked to all the various socials, the YouTube, HDTV website, and also our email address. Okay, yes, email might be a figment of 2010, but we do in fact have one. Also, I have taken the opportunity to put some bonus Easter eggs up on the Linktree page as well. We are available on Substack, substack.com, handle @of his own word. We have much the same as Blue Sky and Facebook, show updates, YouTube links, the New Hampshire legislative updates in responses, both in short and long form updates, and then for many of the reaction statements that I've shared over the course of the year so far can be found. And this one is more in the long form blog update style. And okay, yes, we do have a little bit of reaction to the national misrepresentation as well. Finally, we do have our own YouTube channel, so we're not just on the HTTV website, we're also on YouTube, @of his own word-NH. We have show videos from HTTV, as well as self-made bonus and best of videos available also. And right now we've got a collection of parts 1 through 6 in one video, part 7, 8, and 9 in the second video, and the best of New Hampshire legislative reaction from myself and my guest in parts 2, 3, 4, and I want to say 6, but don't quote me on that. And we also have State Representative Heath Howard's speech from an Able New Hampshire Award event that he and I were both at in January of this year in Concord. And then we have the link to all those videos that I referenced a moment ago, which in 12 shows, so 16 different links on the YouTube video count in all, and this will make number 17 when it's available. Then we have behind the camera we've got Mike Johnson, Director of Community Media, Matt Guerrero, one of the production coordinators, Mike Pylon, Matt's counterpart in terms of production coordinator. Hi, Mike. And then we have the list of those who have joined me to date so far. We have my co-producer Alejandro Urita, who joined me last November for part number 1. Then we fast forward to the aforementioned State Representative Foss and Dr. Louis Espeto, who joined me for part 2 in January of this year. State Representative Heath Howard and Able New Hampshire Policy Director Kristen Evans joined me in February of this year. Shauna Hallberg also joined me in February of this year. Sarah Trzynski joined me in March. Dr. Louis Espeto rejoined me in March, and we'll have an announcement on part 14 on here in just a moment. So we have some final thoughts for the show. Check us out online, Blue Sky, Facebook, HTTV website, Linktree, Substack, and on our YouTube. Stay tuned for part number 14. Drum roll if you please. Come on. Drum roll, please. Now, a quick peel back the curtain for part number 14. I'll be joined by Able New Hampshire community organizer Sarah Georgian to discuss what in Able New Hampshire, and also have a discussion and preview of their next big event, which is the Disability Pride Parade and Festival coming up on July the 18th at the New Hampshire State House. So really looking forward to this. And quick bit of fun fact here. Sarah's going to be the third member of the Able New Hampshire staff to join me on Of His Own Words. And it'll be the fourth time that we've welcomed a representative from Able New Hampshire onto the program. So that'll be coming up in a couple weeks. And stay tuned for part 14. Also, hopefully over that next couple weeks, we'll get confirmation on a show that I really think y'all will find very interesting coming up very soon here. I'm not going to say too much just yet because it's still a work in progress, but we'll have a big announcement coming up soon on not just part 14, but part 15 also. And hard to believe that we're closing out show number 12 for 2026 already. 13 overall. And wherever you're watching us, whichever platform you're watching this on, thanks for watching.